Truong was frozen in shock. He couldn't believe the baby growing inside Tieu was his. In that moment, he held her tightly in the clinic room, while Truong's mother and Hao stood still, tears falling in silent motion. But behind what seemed like a moment of pure happiness, could there be a hidden storm waiting for them ahead? A new life is beginning, yet it's also the doorway to challenges they've never faced before. Will their love be strong enough to overcome it all? Don't miss this video where the truth begins to unfold and the fate of Truong and Tieu. New will keep you watching until the very end. Like, subscribe, and share to continue this emotional journey with us. The moment that thin white paper rested in his hand, Truong felt as if the whole world suddenly stopped. The printed lines on it blurred before his eyes. The light from the clinic window fell across his pale, trembling face. He read it over and over again, every word, every detail, every tiny heartbeat shown on the ultrasound, each one piercing straight through his heart. He stood frozen, chest rising and falling, unable to believe what had just been confirmed. That child, the life growing inside Tieu, was his. A wave of emotion rushed through him, overwhelming and painful all at once. In that instant, memories came flooding back, the days. Tieu wandered alone through the rain looking for him. The nights she cried until there were no tears left, the faded missing posters he once saw by that old tree. He had missed so much time, so much love, and now standing before this truth, all he could do was tremble and whisper inside, "Thank you," for still waiting. Beside him, Tieu stayed silent, her hands clutching the edge of her shirt, eyes fixed on the floor, afraid to look up. She feared his anger. His blame, feared that her lonely months might make him feel guilty. But when she finally lifted her gaze, his eyes were already filled with tears. Without a word, he took a step forward and pulled her into his arms. The embrace was sudden, strong, and full of emotion. His whole body shook. His breath was uneven, caught between sobs. Tieu stood still, at first stunned, then slowly melted into his arms. Her tears fell onto his shoulder, mixing with the warmth between them. In that moment, all fear and distance disappeared, leaving only one truth growing stronger between them, that every bit of pain, waiting, and loss had never been in vain. Truong held her tighter, as if afraid that if he let go, she might vanish again. His voice trembled, but his eyes were filled with determination. In that moment, he was no longer the man who had once lost his way, who had drifted through the chaos. He was a father, a husband, a man who had finally found his reason to live and to love again. The evening sunlight streamed through the window, wrapping them both in a warm glow. Everything else faded away, leaving only their two silhouettes intertwined, as if time itself had stopped to witness a miracle. Inside Truong's heart, a quiet but profound happiness rose. He needed no explanations, no past, no excuses, only this moment, when he knew that Tieu and their child were the most precious things in his life. After the flood of emotion broke through, Truong held Tieu for a long time, as if trying to cling to reality, afraid that if he let go, everything would turn into a fragile dream. He could feel her warmth, her soft yet vivid breath, the breath of the woman who had waited for him through the hardest days. Tieu didn't say anything. She simply rested her head on his shoulder. In that moment, there was no need for promises, no need for explanations. Silence was enough to understand everything. Truong gently released her, his eyes still red. He looked down at the ultrasound paper in his hand, the small image of a faint blurry spot. But to him, it was the most miraculous thing in the world. A new life was growing, carrying his blood, her blood, and the love he thought he had lost. His hand trembled slightly as he gently ran his fingers over the paper, as if afraid that just a little pressure would make the child disappear from this world. Tieu lightly placed her hand on her belly, an instinctive gesture full of love. Inside her, the worry still lingered. She was afraid of the future, afraid of the challenges ahead, afraid that this happiness might be too fragile. But when she looked at Truong, seeing the determination and responsibility in his eyes, she knew she wasn't alone anymore. The man who had once left her had come back, and maybe this time he wouldn't let go. Outside, the gentle breeze blew, carrying the scent of disinfectant and the last warmth of the afternoon sun. Truong's mother and Hao stood nearby, quietly watching the two of them. His mother gently placed her hand over her mouth, trying to hold back the tears that were threatening to fall. She had witnessed so much loss, but now in this moment, she could feel true happiness. Hao softly touched her hand, offering a kind, quiet smile, like a blessing that didn't need to be spoken. Truong turned back, took Tieu hand, and gave a subtle nod, a silent promise. He said to himself, "I won't let you cry again." And in the twilight, as the shadows of people outside faded away, the two of them, who had weathered so many storms, now stood side by side at the crossroads of fate. A new beginning awaited them, not just the journey of two people, but the journey of a family. As Truong stepped out of the clinic, he gently lifted his head and took a deep breath. The afternoon air felt strangely pure, the weak sunlight filtering through the trees and casting a shimmering glow on the road. Each breath he took felt both unfamiliar and sacred. In his hand, he still held the fragile test result, trembling but heavy with meaning. He stared at it like it was a miracle, then glanced at Tieu walking beside him, offering her a soft smile. Truong's mother and Hao were waiting outside. When they saw them come out, his mother quickly approached, her eyes filled with both worry and hope. Truong remained silent, as if he couldn't speak just yet. The emotions inside him were rising like waves. Everything from the revival of his love to the sudden responsibility of becoming a father was so overwhelming that he had to struggle to keep his composure. Finally, he handed the test result to his mother. She took it, her eyes trembling as she read each line of text, then slowly looked up. In front of her stood her son, the one she had feared would never return, and the girl she loved like her own. She pressed her lips together, tears streaming down her face, unable to say a word. Hao stepped closer, gently touching Truong's shoulder, her voice choking with happiness. Though she didn't know the full story of his past in this moment, she understood that life has a way of arranging things so that those who seem to have lost everything can find light at the end of the tunnel. Truong smiled softly, a light yet deep smile. He looked at his mother, then at Tieu, who stood there quietly, her eyes still filled with emotion. He walked over and embraced his mother. The hug was wordless, but it was enough for her to understand that her son had truly grown. He was no longer the man who avoided responsibility, no longer the lost soul wandering in the dark. Now he was a father, a son, a man who had finally found what truly matters in life. She broke into tears, tears rolling down her cheeks. She gently placed her hand on Truong's back, crying, and smiling a warm, proud smile that spoke volumes. Hao stood nearby, silently wiping away her own tears. The air around them seemed to slow down, as if time itself was standing still to witness this sacred moment. Truong turned to Tieu Nu, gently taking her hand. He looked into her eyes that had once been full of sorrow, now filled with a glimmer of light. "Mom," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. Thank you for always believing in me." Believing in her, his mother nodded, her tears still flowing. She looked at Tieu Nu, then gently brushed her hair as if forgiving all the years she had spent alone. As the evening light began to fade, the faces of the three women, a mother, a friend, and one carrying new life, all shone with a pure, warm, and hopeful emotion. Truong stood silently still, holding the test result, and quietly told himself, "From now on, everything will be different. I'll start over for you." For the baby, in his heart, a new chapter was beginning, a chapter of love, of responsibility, and of a family soon to be reborn.